That's right. See you later, David the Great. See you. Those are great.
you in the morning. Just inside Easter day. There is great faithful pilgrim blessed be to lay. I will meet you. I will meet you. Just inside Eastern gate over there. I will meet you. I will meet you. I will meet you in the morning over there. If you hasten on to glory, Eastern day. Oh, I'm coming in the morning, and you'll not have long to wait. I will meet you. I will meet you. Just inside Eastern gate over there. I will meet you. I will meet you. I will meet you in the morning over there. Keep your lamps all trimmed and burning, for upright would watch and wait. He'll be with us at that meeting, just inside Eastern gate. I will meet you. I will meet you. Just inside Eastern gate over there. I will meet you. I will meet you. I will meet you in the morning over there. The joy of that glad evening, when the saints before us wait. What a blessed happy meeting, just inside Eastern gate. I will meet you. I will meet you. Just inside Eastern gate over there. I will meet you. I will meet you. I will meet you in the morning over there. It's good to see each one of you here to support the family of our dear brother Marvin Roy Chandler. It was very special to us, and affected my life in a lot of ways. But before we get started, I'd like for us to have a word of prayer. Matt Simons, would you come up and pray for us?
Heavenly righteous Father, we ask that you would we thank you for letting us gather here for this occasion. We thank you for Uncle Roy's testimony. We ask that you would just go with all those who are here with heavy hearts, Lord. Ask that you would just be the God of comfort that we know that you are in your scriptures. We ask that you would use Uncle Roy's testimony to be a comfort to his family, those who have seen him live a life completely sold out for you, Lord, that you've seen his testimony and you've seen the comfort that it brings to know that someone is in a home in heaven, Lord. We thank you so much. We know that he's home with Dawn and that he's in a place of comfort, Lord, and rejoicing, shouting on the hills of glory. And we just thank you for that testimony. We ask that you would just help that to impress upon hearts, Lord, that are here to know that he's in a better place, Lord. And we just thank you for everyone who's come out to show their love and support for the family. We thank you for this family of God that you've given us, Lord. And we just ask that you would just go with everything that's said and done, have it be in your name, have it to uplift a testimony for you, Lord. And all this we ask in your name. Amen.
I was asked to do this job a couple months ago, so it gives you a lot of time to think about what you want to say. But anyway, it's not an easy job, as I'm finding out, that to talk about my brother, but my friend. And I heard that Monday morning that he had passed away. The song came to my mind that he started quite a bit in church, just sweeping through to glory. And that's what happened that Monday morning. He went to be with God, went to be with Jesus. And it's what he'd been working for ever since he came back and to this altar here at the campground and got sanctified. And he was a diligent soldier for the Lord, for the church from that point forward. Roy's 11 years older than I am, and I was sanctified at 12 years old and kind of started, mixing with the young folks a little bit between 12, 13, 14. That time I always looked up to Roy. He was, nice looking, trim, active, good personality. Always that time they had a perfect crew cut haircut that had a lot of at that time. And so I thought, well, I'll just be nice to be like Roy. But that's not the way things are intended to be. Each of us has our own makeup and our own personality. But at that time, we didn't really have much in common as far as the age difference and, our interest and likes and so forth that is so different. And when I think about through the years, I always heard about Roy and Jim. They were always like one, and kind of sound like they were up to some funny things at different times. But I don't know much of those stories, but I'm sure there's others that do that could chime in on those things. Dawn was sanctified in the Delaware Feast meeting in 2001, and this kind of started our relationship together. Roy would take Uncle Ray to the feast meetings in Delaware, did that for several years. And when Dawn got sanctified, I think he took notice of her and caught his eye. He said she was really, really pretty when she got sanctified. She was a really beautiful woman. And then they really got acquainted in the camp meeting of 2004. And they were married on October 17th, 2004. So I did not waste any time on that regard. But I know I look back and I think, well, God knew just what they both needed. They needed a mate. He put them together. And I just think it was well done what God did for them. When Roy and Dawn got married and was starting courting and got married, they really brought us close together. We were really close to Dawn, taking her to feast meetings and try to keep her encouraged, meeting her in Chincoteague and so forth. And at that time, it didn't seem like the age difference made any difference anymore. That 11 years just kind of seemed to level out. And we had a lot in common. And we enjoyed worshiping together in Chincoteague and Delaware, some church services there, taking trips together, and staying at each other's homes. And that really gets you acquainted, and you spend a lot of friendly times together. Roy was ordained as a minister for the Delaware and the Chincoteague Church, both that represent both churches. He was a great Sunday school teacher in Chincoteague. Him and Alice would switch back and forth and teach the class there in Chincoteague, and still today have a good group that loves the Lord and enjoys studying the Word together. He was instrumental. Him and Dawn were both instrumental in having Bible studies in Delaware. Besides the feast meeting, they had that once a week for quite a while, and trying to do what they can to increase the Delaware congregation and get more people involved. And there they got several couples that got sanctified working under them and bringing them, involving them in the church and so forth. And a lot of it is learning exactly what sanctification was, about the indwelling of the Holy Spirit in their heart. Chincoteague congregation really missed him when him and Dawn moved to the campground due to his illness and tended to her. And he did a wonderful job managing her illness and appointments and treatments and everything that had to be done. Dawn would usually call Alice about once a day at least to see what's going on, give her, find out what was happening. He would ask, what's Roy doing today? He said, well, he's gone to the grocery store. He went to the grocery store just about every day. He planned what he wanted that menu to be, maybe for lunch or dinner, and he would go and get what he needed and make the meal for the day. But he was a wonderful cook. He did most of the cooking. Dawn made most of the desserts and sweets. He was a wonderful cook, and whatever he made was delicious. You never know if he was visiting with him. Breakfast, he might have a pan of tomato gravy to put over biscuits or grits or whatever he had. Or he might have a pot of beans for lunch. He's telling us about when he was growing up with so many in the family, they almost always had beans because it was a economical way to feed your family and nourishing as well. And I tell you, he did a wonderful baked ham, like for feast meeting or a gathering. We usually had a Christmas dinner at Chincoteague, Christmas lunch rather, and he'd bake a ham. And he'd say, after it cooled, he said, Danny, why don't you come carve the ham for me? You do such a good job with it. So I found out real quick that it wasn't that I did such a good job, it's just he didn't want to do it. So he passed it. Flattery gets you a lot of places, but I was always glad to help him out and do what I could for fellowship. Roy was very talented with music. He had a beautiful voice and could play the organ so well. And a lot of times if we was at their house and we were getting ready for church, he'd be getting there and playing the organ and singing and kind of gets you excited about getting ready to go to church and enjoy the church service that was coming up. He loved the campground. Dawn and Roy spent a lot of time both in Delaware and the campground. Usually when they got one to the other, they always had a plan when they're going back to if they're at the Delaware, they plan on going back to the campground. Through the campground, they're going back to Delaware. Kind of had a plan for their travels back and forth. He always had lots of stories to tell about things that happened years ago. He had a wonderful memory for events. I don't know how he kept things so straight and remember the details of what went on. He talked about being raised in a household of eight children and the things that they run across, but it sounded like they just had a wonderful life growing up and the time together. The children were D.W. I think he was probably about out of the house by the time Roy came along with the age difference. Not certain about that. Then Dora and Catherine and Anime and Billy and Ernie and Mary and Roy. I don't know if I got them exactly right in age order or not, but he loved his family. And often when he would, things would come up, he'd say, I miss my sister, I miss my brother. Just had a fondness for that family growing up together. He might tell funny things that happened in church and always enjoyed interaction with his children and grandchildren. They were very, very special to him. Some of the stories he would tell, we've heard many times, but you never got tired of hearing them because he made it interesting or funny again just because it was Roy telling it, his way of speaking. Sometimes he would tell us about the cars that different ones owned. You know, a few years back we were took a trip to Lancaster with Dan and Janice and Alice and myself and Roy and Dawn. And it was that particular day we went to Hershey and it was raining terrible. So we said, well, let's go to the car museum. So we went to the car museum and Dan and Roy could walk through and tell you each car, who had a car like it, or they had this car except it was a different color. Or it was the year before that car, a certain one had that one or that one. And so that was like a walk through time just to hear them talk about the different ones and what they had and memories it brought back to them. And some of them were pretty fast. Some of them tried to talk about speed and just how fast they could drive. Aunt Dora come to Roy one camp meeting and says, Roy, son, says, I've heard rumors that there's some racing going on between Perry and between the campground and Perry. He said, well, Aunt Doris says, don't worry about it. I'll check into that for you. Oh, she said, I just want to make sure, I sure hope it's none of our Norfolk boys that are doing that. And he said, well, don't worry about it. I'll check into that for you. So smooth it over. Also, I noticed in the obituary it mentioned about him doing tile work after he quit school. And he did tile work for my grandfather, Bill Hobbs. And my granddad told him, says, Roy, when you put up the tile on the wall, butter each piece. That meant put the mud on the back of each piece and then put them on the wall. So he said, okay, he'd do that. Well, Roy didn't exactly follow instructions. And my granddad come back to him and says, oh, Roy, did you butter the tile like I asked you to? He says, no, Uncle Bill, I found a much better way, much quicker way to do it. You could put the mud over the whole wall and then stick the tile up there. So he told him, he said, well, let's do this, Roy. How about you take the tiles down, clean them up, and then when you put them back up, you can butter them before you put them up. He said, I'll do that, Uncle Bill. So he said he learned an important lesson that day about following instructions and what was expected. And you know, when I think of our sanctified life, it's important to follow what God has given us and to teach us how to walk, and then we'll be profitable and we'll grow in the Spirit if we follow what God has set up for us, the instructions He's given us to walk by. A little bit of scripture I wanted to read in Psalms 121. It says, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is my keeper. The Lord is my shade upon my right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth forever and ever. So I'm thankful for the protection that God gives us, the keeping power He gives us, so we can live a sanctified life and be pleasing to God. I'll miss my friend, but I know where he is, and that's his comfort. We're going to take some time. If anybody has anything they'd like to say to the family about Roy, it's time to pause right now to do that. Pam?
Roy was always close with Aunt Dora's kids. Just about every Sunday he would come home on Sunday and eat lunch with my family. And we got to know Roy very, very good. We were thrilled when him and Dawn moved to the campground. Not necessarily for her health. We weren't thrilled about that, but we were thrilled that they were here. And the main reason that he wanted to move here with Dawn was he felt like he would have enough people in our campground church that would help take care of her and be a comfort and visit and all that, which we did. And a lot of times Stan and I would go over there just to visit with Roy and Dawn. And as she progressed and got worse, she got it in her head that she wanted to clean. So she would open the cabinets under the kitchen sink to look in there to see if she could find cleaning products. And more often than not, she would squat and then she would sit down on the floor. Well, there was no way she could get back up, and Roy couldn't get her up either. One time we went down there to try to help him, and he had tears in his eyes. He says, I don't know what to do. I said, well, Roy, you need to call EMS. They'll come get her up. So that's what he did. But it got to the point where Stan and I would go down there and try to do it. Sometimes we were able to. Most of the time we were able to, but then sometimes we were not. But we enjoyed being with them. We enjoyed his humor. He always, like Danny was saying, he was a wonderful cook, and he would always cook good meals and everything. One thing I had to tell him, and I told him I was going to tell this at his viewing, because it was so Roy, okay? He had had several bottles of the same medicine, and he decided he wanted to put them all together in the same bottle and get rid of the extra bottles. So he inadvertently tossed them in the trash can. So I was sitting at home, Stan was in the restroom, I don't know if he was in the shower or whatever, but anyway, Roy called me. I said, "What's going on, Uncle Roy?" He says, "I need help." I said, "What's going on?" He says, "Well, I think I've thrown my medicine away, and it's in the dumpster." And so I said, "Okay, well, I'll get in my car and my grabber, and I'll meet you down there." So he comes down on his golf cart with a flashlight, and I meet him down there with my grabber and my car. And we stood on the back of the golf cart, and fortunately, he used bags that had red tie things, so his was very easy to find. And I mean, we dug through trash and all garbage and all that kind of stuff, but we did find his medicine. And he said, "I am so glad I found that." He said, "It would have been $1,200 worth of medicine that I would have lost if he hadn't have got it." I said, "Well, Roy, when you pass away at your viewing, I'm going to tell everybody that me and you went dumpster diving," because that's exactly what we did. But we had a good time with Roy and Dawn, and Dawn and I was 6 months older than her, so we were very close in age. But she loved Roy dearly. And another thing, two things I wanted to say was they was at the campground, and her mother got sick and was put in the hospital in Delaware. They drove straight through. They left camp meeting and went straight to Delaware to the hospital where she was at. And Roy talked to her, and she ended up getting sanctified on her hospital bed. And Dawn was thrilled that her mother finally got sanctified. And then the funeral director there, because it's a small, Dagsboro is a small little town, they knew her very well. And of course, Dawn had lots and lots of jewelry, and so did her mother. And so he was telling her, "We need to put some earrings or necklaces or something on her." And he said that to her brother, and her brother says, "Nope, she don't want it, Dawn don't want it, and I want whatever they want." So she never got any of that put on her. She was buried like a sanctified lady. And then another person that he witnessed to and brought him to the Lord was Howard Lynch. He was in the hospital bed, and he couldn't communicate. But Roy talked to him. He said, "Howard, all you have to do is just talk to the Lord in your heart, and he'll hear you." And Roy said big old tears ran down his cheeks whenever he found the Lord. And so those were two people that were family members to him after he married Dawn that he brought to the Lord. So his work, even in Delaware, was never done. He still had things he could do. And, I ended up taking Dawn up to Atlanta. She had an appointment up there, and I used to live in Atlanta, and I used to work at Emory, which is where she was going. So I said, "Well, I will drive her up there, but we're going to go the day before because her appointment was like 9 o'clock in the morning." I said, "We will never make it there in time if we leave the morning of." So her and I went to Emory, stayed at a motel, and then we went for her appointment, then we came back. So we had a lot of fun times together, Dawn and I did, before she got too bad. We go shopping and giggle and laugh like two sisters, and we thoroughly enjoyed them being on the campground. Stan and I would go by and visit with them a lot and enjoyed his humor. He always had something funny to say, and it just kept us in stitches most of the time. But Uncle Roy, I've missed him so much since he moved to Charleston, but he was in a He was in a better place that he needed to be with family. And I went by and saw him March the 1st of this year and got my picture taken with him and hugged him and everything, and I told him how much I loved him. He said, I love you too, Pam. Another thing, too, is he married Stan and I. And he said that's the first and only funeral. That's the first and only wedding that he had ever done. He said it made him too nervous. He was not marrying anybody else. But when we were doing the rehearsal the night before, this was so funny. Dawn was my matron of honor, and so she walked down the aisle, and Roy was standing there, and he cocked his eyes over at her. He goes, "Does your mama let you date?" And it cracked all of us up. So we just always had a really good time with Dawn and Roy, and they were truly missed out of our family.
Anyone else like to speak?
I'm way out of my comfort zone, but Roy, who he allowed me to call him Pop, is worth it. When I met Marty in 2018 and we started dating, I knew how close his family was, and I grew up not in a close family and in foster care, and so so I never really I never experienced unconditional love. I didn't have it, but whenever I met the Chandlers, it was just amazing to me how close they were, and how the first time I met Dawn and Roy, they were passing through around Thanksgiving, and Marty and I were just dating at the time. And I remember Marty asked me to be at the house when they got there, and I had heard Marty talk to his dad many times on the phone prior to this, and I just remember being a little envious over how close they were and how close their relationship was. I mean, they talked every day. And then even at night, sometimes Marty would call his dad and he would say, "Dad, have y'all turned into pumpkins yet?" But I just thought, what an amazing relationship to talk to your dad, a couple of times a day and talk about just anything, just everything and anything. They just would talk. And but when I met them, they were so warm and welcoming to somebody they didn't really know. I mean, Marty and I only dated for just a couple of months before. We dated 6 months before we got married, so they didn't really know me yet. And but after we were married, he said to me, there are no. It's like Mike said the other night, he always refers to me as Marty's wife, not his daughter-in-law. And a lot of times when we'd go to doctor's office appointments with him and all that, and Marty would be parking the car, he'd just refer to me as his daughter. And he will never know how much that meant to me, to have somebody love me unconditionally and without reservation. And he was just a wonderful man. And when he came to stay with us, I know the biggest fear I had is I never wanted him to feel like he was visiting. I wanted him to feel like that was his home, and he did. And he, just like everybody says, he is a wonderful cook. And Mackenzie taught him how to use Instacart. And so he had groceries delivered. I mean, who wouldn't want that? I work all day, come home, your father-in-law's, has dinner cooked and groceries. And I mean, he was just an amazing man. And I feel blessed that he agreed to come live with us so that I could get to know him on a much deeper level than just what we had. And so it was an honor and a privilege to have him at our house, and he will be very missed. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I guess it's kind of my turn, I guess. Not necessarily thrilled to be here on these circumstances this evening, but, I'm very happy to be among sanctified people and be amongst y'all this evening. And I'm not here to give a testimony or anything, but I am very glad to say I'm converted and sanctified. And I'm saying that because I mean it, and also because I know my pop loved hearing me say it too as well. I'm not gonna tell. I could spend all night telling stories about me and my pop going to Walmart with Chandler, and getting me out of school early and all that kind of fun stuff. But I'm just gonna say a couple of quick few things. Pop lived with me and my mom when my dad and mom were still together when I was a boy, and then when him and Don got married, obviously he moved up to the Delaware church and revived that church, and very thankful for how that all worked out. It did wonders for our crowd and our whole congregation as a whole for sure. But I don't think that there was anybody like on the face of the earth besides Dawn and Pop that wanted to hear me testify more just than them two. Because they'd watch Charleston Church every single Wednesday night, and if I didn't testify, I was getting a text at the church like, "Hey, why didn't you testify?" We were watching, we wanted to hear. And I at a certain point I did get a little bit tired of it, but I loved the encouragement, and looking back on it, it meant the world to me too, because I knew that they were watching over me and wanted me to be a great worker for the Lord, and I knew they were always going to be there for me. And that always really meant a lot. But a couple of quick things that kind of always brought me joy a little bit. Whenever me and Pop were living together, whether that was at the beginning of my life when he was down here in Charleston before he moved to Delaware, or back when he was back in Charleston with us after Dawn had passed away, whenever we were having breakfast together, like in the morning time if we're having breakfast, I don't know if you know anything about me or anything, but I do not like coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker. Pop loved coffee. Huge coffee drinker. And so he'd have coffee every morning. And at the beginning of my life, I was a baby, he was up there making the coffee, and, "Hey, Trace, you want a little bit of coffee?" "No, Pop, don't want no coffee." "No, thank you." "Well, what you want in?" "Don't want no coffee." "Well, what you want in?" "Don't want no coffee." And got so tired of that. So tired of that. And it happened every single morning, even when I'd be here at the campground going over to Dawn and Pop's cabin for French toast in the morning before church. "Trace, want some coffee?" "Don't want no coffee." And so I guess time's kind of a flat circle a little bit. Back when Pop was living with us, and myself and Dad and Michelle more so were taking care of him a little bit and helping him cook his food and have his meals and stuff like that. Some days he would love to eat. Some days he wouldn't like to eat too much. He didn't have a huge appetite sometimes. So we'd always ask him all kind of annoying questions to him. "Hey, Pop, you want some water? You want some tomato soup? You want some fruit, peach cup, whatever you want it is." And there was one day, back home when towards the end of his life a little bit, he just didn't want to eat that day. Just didn't want to eat. And, that was one of those days. And I think my dad was asking him, "Hey, do you want some beans? Do you want some rice? Do you want a biscuit? Do you want an Arby's roast beef sandwich?" No, everything no. And then finally, I came into the room, "Pop, you want a cup of coffee?" And he goes, "No." And I go, "What you want in it?" And that was probably one of the biggest smiles I ever saw him see the last half of his life, and that really brought me a whole lot of joy. And also too, there was one thing that I know that my pop would always love me, whether my successes were great, my failures were terrible, whatever they were. But there was one thing that I never wanted to let Pop down with whatever I did. I know when he was able to, he came to my baseball games on the weekends or whatever it was, and like I said, he would watch me testify, and if I did testify or preach the campaign, I'd go back to the cabin and he'd hug on me, love on me, and be like, "Trace, I really enjoyed your testimony, got a lot out of it, love you so much," and stuff like that. And but for whatever success or failure I could ever have in my life, and I know we all, I'm sure, feel this way about our grandfather or our mother or our father, whatever it is. But whatever success or failure we can come across in our life, I guess I was talking to my dad on the phone. I think it was the Monday after Pop passed away, this previous Monday morning. We were talking, and I guess the biggest thing that I don't want to do is let Pop down and miss that mark of making it to heaven and a home in heaven. And I guess that's something me and my dad and I talked about. We're not necessarily not by any means doing it for our family or for our dad or for our sister. Like I said, I'm not here to testify for sure, but I love my pop, and I'm really miss him. And I guess my biggest prayer is, that I continue to do my part and, continue and reflect his light throughout this earth and try to make it to a home in heaven, not miss mine where I can make it to a home in heaven. And I pray that, everybody else here does the same, that they're living that life and following and pleasing to God. And again, that's all I really have, but I'm really appreciative of everyone that was able to make it here on pretty short notice. I know that this is a tough weekend for a lot of people in our church, not just my family. And I know that my pop, really didn't want anybody to ever, not feel like they were thought of or loved or included. I know that my family is here mourning a loss this weekend, but, I know there is also another family here this morning, a loss just the same, if not greater as well. I just want all of us to be in prayer for all of us this weekend, that we be with each other for the size of this weekend. And that's all I have, and I love y'all. Y'all pray for me.
Thank you, Trace.
Well, got to back my cousin Trace did so good, and I probably our church is just so special, and our folks are so special, and you get a few generations removed, and unless you're sticking with the Lord, you're not really going to know your extended family that well. And I'm so thankful that I've had a good relationship with my cousins and just down the line, second and third cousins, and I've had a lot of great memories with Trace, and just my Uncle Roy. When we would go up to Delaware, that's most of my memories. I do have memories with Uncle Roy before him and Dawn had gotten together, but everything sort of changed when they got together. They became like a powerhouse. They became just a new creation, so to speak. And most of my memories are of Uncle Roy are since him and Dawn. It's always been in my mind, Uncle Roy and Dawn, and we just loved going up to Delaware anytime that we had a chance to. And it was just, we'd get in the van, we'd go up there, and the way that they would welcome us into their homes, and they would, take care of us and prepare food for us, and just whatever it is, that really just has an impact, and you feel it, and you hold on to that, and I just felt that way, and I'll just say this: I was there in the service when Dawn had gotten her sins forgiven, when she had made the start for the Lord. And something about that service has stuck with me. I just feel like there's times in your life where you might wake up and want to make a change, and some people do, and some people do that just on their own. They don't have the Lord in their life, but they make a change in some way, and they live life a little bit differently, But whenever Dawn got converted and she came to the Lord, there was something about the fact that you couldn't deny that what was happening was completely of the Lord. It was 100% change, and the way that it came all over her, it was just just undeniable of how the Lord was working to just call her, and once she responded and just yielded everything over and gave complete control to the Lord, and you saw her whole life change. Yeah. And you just saw down the line as her and Roy got together and had so many great years together, that clearly the Lord knows what he's doing. He clearly has a plan, and he was executing that plan for Dawn and behind the scenes for Roy to bring them together. And it just, I'll never forget that service, and I'm just so thankful for the testimony that now provides for all of those around us who have seen their lives and saw that union that the Lord brought together. And so I'm just thankful for that. I'm thankful for what his family has meant to my family, and how they've extended. You've opened doors to us. You've made your home a place of welcome and refuge, and so I'm just thankful for that.
Anyone else?
I'm not good at this. I get emotional when I'm nervous. But just sitting over there, I thought, I don't know why I thought of it, but I think, I want to say 2018, 2019, a couple years ago, one camp meeting, Aunt Dawn and Uncle Roy invited me and Trace to go with them to Olive Garden. And I guess he got that Zuppa Toscana soup or something like that. And Aunt Dawn asked him how it was, and he said, well, it's Zuppa good. And I just always say that to Trace every now and then, and we laugh about it because it was always funny. But I thought about what Michelle said. After my granddad died, Billy, he would always call me on Facebook or text me or say it to me, just my other granddaughter. So that always meant a lot to me. And then something else I thought of also, everybody always says I look like Mom. I don't always see it, I don't always believe it, but everybody does. And so Grammy or Mom or Dad will go through every name before they get to mine. Sometimes I get called Gracie all the time. But he would always, if I talked to him, he'd say, hey girl. And I figured he always called me that, because if he didn't, he would call me Gracie. So he's really the only reason I believe that I look like Mom in a paper, because he always, it was Gracie or hey girl, never Hannah.
Anyone else want to speak?
Well, all of you probably have a funny story. My dad always carried some humor, seemed like in his front pocket. And when I say that this is all too soon, not that he passed away too soon, but what he has said was, when I pass, I want to lay in the casket for weeks because I want people to mourn over me for a long time. He always had some humor. I remember when I was just a little kid. You know, we used to lay on the couch and watch TV and talk, and I'd tell him. I remember one afternoon I said, Dad, I said, can I go get a new bicycle? And he lay there. And he says, well, son, he says, we can't quite afford that right now. I'm like, well, Dad, I said, what do you mean? He says, we just can't afford it right now. I said, well, Dad, you know about checks, don't you? And he always used to tell me, he says, I would say, well, we'd talk about something, and he would say, you know, he says, I'm a genius. I said, what do you mean you're a genius? He says, I can't think of nothing that I don't know. And he would tell me that from time to time as I was just a little guy. And I went to school. I was like in the second grade, and my teacher they was asking questions, and they said, does anybody know what a genius is? And I'm like, ooh. I'm like, I got this one. He says, okay. He said, Marty, tell us why you think you know what a genius is. I said, because my dad's a genius. She says, well, what do you mean your dad's a genius? I said, because he's been telling me he can't think of nothing he don't know. He was a funny guy. He was a fabulous dad. He was the greatest dad in the world. You know, we grew very close bonds. We grew together, and y'all might have heard me say on Wednesday night, you know, we lived together, you know, throughout our lives, 27 years. We worked together throughout our lives for 15 of those years. So we've had a lot of experiences together. We've talked a lot together. We've had some great times together. He will truly be missed. He's a great guy. He kept the humor all the way up until the last couple of days, and I'll say one more thing. I pushed him kind of hard to eat, there in the last months where he wasn't eating, he didn't feel good, and he was losing weight. Michelle even told me, said you pushed your dad too hard, for that, and of course, I just wanted the best for him. But in his last few weeks, of course, he was in the bed, and it came down to the last few days to where it was hard to communicate. And come the last, I think the 2 days before he passed, when it was very hard for him to acknowledge, even by a nod, because at that point he didn't have enough strength to talk. But I always wanted to make sure that he was comfortable. I wanted to make sure that he didn't have a need. But I would ask him, are you hot? Are you cold? Do you want the covers on? Do you want them off? Are your legs high enough? Do you want the pillow moved from this side? Do you want some water? Do you want some ice? And and I was asking him all those questions, and me and Michelle were there in the room, and he wouldn't acknowledge, and he wouldn't acknowledge at all. And I said, Dad, are you tired of me asking you all these questions? And he shook his head, yeah. So, he was ready to go. I love him. We had some great times together, and I'm glad to say that I'll see him again one day in heaven. Yes. Y'all pray for us.
I'm not as good at this, but I did want to just say I appreciate everyone coming. I appreciate this church. I love my dad so much, and we're going to miss him terribly. I have such good memories of him from all the way back in childhood, teaching us to just having fun with us, even if it was just in the yard or around the house. Taught me to water ski, always bringing home puppies. And then even when he moved away, going to visit him weekends, summers, holidays, it was like a vacation all the time, just to be with him and spending time with him. It didn't matter what we were doing. We loved to build a fire, and it didn't even have to be cold outside. If we asked to build a fire, he'd build us a fire. And we were so glad, though, when he did come back to Charleston, and just to be able to run by there all the time after work, just for a couple of hours, not only family events and holidays and weekends and special times, but just anytime. It was very nice to have him back, and I just have great memories, love him so much, and going to miss him so much. My mom couldn't be here, and you may have heard me read this on Wednesday, but I told her I would, so I will one more time. She's out of the country, and she wanted to say that her heart goes out to my two children, Sherry and Marty, as they have lost their sweet dad. I'm really sad I'm not in the country, but I'm there in spirit and rejoicing that Roy is now in heaven with Jesus and all his many loved ones. I'm so grateful for the wonderful years Roy and I had together, which is part of me. We made so many beautiful memories along with our two very kind and easygoing children, and these memories will be cherished forever. Roy was a good father, loved his two children deeply, and very rarely had to discipline them. They were both just good kids. Even though our years apart, we always remained friends and treated each other with respect and kindness. We made a point to always share family birthdays together, holidays, and many special events with our family and children. This was a wonderful gift God gave us four. Roy had a humorous side that everyone loved and enjoyed, just a fun-loving person. And I'll just have to say, Emery, I'm glad he got to meet his first great-grandson. And Emery loves to laugh. And I really hope he got Dad's sense of humor. As he grows, I'll be looking for that. But Very often I see a piece of Roy in our children. Your spirit lives on in them, and your love for your children and the Lord will always be a guiding light to us. I will meet you in the morning over there, and I will too. Thank you.
She coming up?
I moved in with Roy and Emily and the family in April of 1970, and when I left home, and they took me in and treated me like one of the children, even though I was 16 years old. They gave me Marty's room, and put Marty and Sherry in the room together, and I was there for about 3 years. Roy would lay on the couch, and he had a sweet tooth like nobody's business. He'd have a bag of hard candy, individually wrapped, each one of these candies. And he would lay on that couch, and he would get him one out and reach over the back and drop the paper. There must have been, when we moved the couch, a ton of paper wrappers. You just don't see that, don't know it. And Sherry talks about the dog. He says, I need you to take this dog off somewhere and just drop him off somewhere. He said, we don't need a dog. And I don't know if you knew that, but so I took him off. I took him from where we lived, and it was probably 25 miles or so. Went to work, and I let him out and took off, and he's just looking so sad. And when I came back that afternoon from work, the dog had been there all day long, waiting. Well, I had to bring him back home. No way I could leave him. I said, Roy, I said, you're going to have to do this with the dog. I can't do it. We've done so many things together. When Gloria was pregnant with Travis, me and Roy went out in the boat, and it was rough, and it was in July, and we went in the harbor, and it was, and we would just go, and I said, I need her to have this baby quick because there's a big prize. He was born on July of 1976, and there was a bicentennial thing that had a big prize if you're born on first one born. Well, he came on the 10th. He's always been a problem, and always late. So, but Marty has confidence in me to look after his dad. Sometimes when they went out of town, Dad, Mick, can you put this on your calendar? And being retired, you think you don't have much time, but you got some time that you can spare. But when you're retired, sometimes you don't have too much time. It's surprising. Doctors just love to see you. And so I was over there spending the weekend with him, and Marty and Michelle were gone off, and I just stayed there tonight, packed my bag and stayed there. And we were always pretty close, so didn't have any problem with whatever he wanted to do. And I said, Roy, I tell you what, let's do while I'm here. Let's go ahead and write up your funeral arrangements. This was a year ago. And he said, yeah, it's a good idea. So we got the songbook down, and I had a notepad, and we wrote down the preachers and the pallbearers and honorary pallbearers, and the list was so long. I said, I don't know if we can get all these into church. And but he said a special for some people that he wanted to make sure that they could attend. I said, well, in 10 years from now, we'll see if they're still around. And that was a year ago, and he was been ready to go. And he says that. He says, I'm ready to go. And I appreciate his life. And I went to see him Friday, and I said, Roy, I said, and I was holding his hand, and I said, I don't want you to answer these questions. I'm not asking you to answer because he couldn't. He would struggle to talk. And I said, you can just nod your head. And so I'd ask him one thing or another, and he would nod his head or shake his head. He could understand what you were saying to him. But I didn't want him to strain to have to talk. And he always, except for that one time, because he couldn't talk, asked me, how's the family doing? As soon as I come in and greet him, how's the family doing? He's always concerned about you and your stuff and not his stuff. And he had a little Carmagia, which is some kind of a Volkswagen. And I was about 17 years old, and that thing would go around the corner like you wouldn't believe. It just darted around. And it quit running. So I called Uncle Roy. I said, Roy, this thing quit running. He said, where are you? I said, I'm over here on Belvedere Drive or wherever it happened to be. And he would come over there. I'd sit around waiting on him to get there. And he would open the battery was in the back, and he opened it up, and the battery had flipped over and come loose from together. And he said, well, there's the problem right there. He said, you haven't been driving it fast, have you? I said, oh, no, I don't know what happened. But he was always gracious. And when I didn't have any money, I was living there, I was working at Shoney's, and they was overpaying me at $1.10 an hour. And I worked after school and on the weekends, whenever I could get some hours in, and I might make $20 a week or $25. Well, I was going to play baseball for the high school, and I was out there in tennis shoes, and the coach says, you need to have some baseball cleats. I said, well, I'm on the team? He says, well, I don't know. I said, well, if I make the team, I'll buy the cleats. I said, I can't afford to buy cleats if I'm not on the team. If I make the team, I'll buy the cleats. It was like $25 for that. And I didn't have the money. I made the team. And I was trying to get them, and Roy bought me a pair of cleats to play baseball. And he was just bigger than life. And I had so many stories over the last 50 years that just can't contain it. It's just too much. Great person. We studied the Bible together. He really had knowledge of the Bible. And we had a little men's Bible study group. A lot of old people, Willie Hagan and Roy Chandler, Carol Cease, Horace Curry, Bob Layman's. He was a younger one. Yeah, he's 81. Yeah, and then myself, I was kind of the ringleader, but Roy couldn't make some of them, so we decided to include him. We would just go to his house. So I'd call Marty. I said, Marty, can we come over and have Bible study with Roy? And sometimes he would say yes, and sometimes says, well, we got to go to the doctor that day or something. So we would postpone it or move it or have it in somebody else's house. But we always wanted him to be, this group always wanted him to be included and try to keep him included for as long as we could. And all of them love Roy. Roy was just always give out a good answer in some of the stuff that we had, and it was just fun to listen to these old people. I was learning from these people that have been on the way for 50, 60 years. And I'm a newbie, you know. I had my 3-year-old birthday not long ago, and I really appreciate that group of guys. I think a lot of them, they're just special people. And one of them's over there, and someday I'll be laying over there. We all will make that final position, laying over there. If you're not ready beforehand, you won't make it up there.
Right, be prepared.
So it's important, and he would tell you that. It's important to be ready down here in order to make it up there. Y'all pray for me.
Appreciate all the memories that's been shared. It's been enjoyable, I think, for all of us. If everybody will stand, lunch is tomorrow at 12 o'clock. It's for the family to be there so they can go through the line first.
Sweeping through to glory.
Lift up the Lord in my soul, shouting hallelujah, swiftly roll. On the hallelujah sound, every soul is glad, sweeping through to glory. We have a busy day tomorrow with the lunch at 12, and then a funeral at 2, and then the viewing for Sister Evelyn Ruth at 6:30? 6:30 tomorrow night here in the sanctuary. So thankful for everyone that was here. Let's look to the Lord and be dismissed. Brother Brad Hagan, dismiss us.
Lord, we thank you so much for this gathering here tonight, Lord. We thank you for the memories that we have of the Lord, the context of your word. We ask you